Hello, ProGeologist here with GeoEarth Solutions. This is the start of our education series where we're going to start looking at concepts for spatial thinking. It's great to know about a GIS, but what about the rudimentary baseline, if you will, foundational material that we need to know when it comes to using a GIS? This series will look at that, and we'll start with what is a GIS? In this particular video, we're going to assess a couple of topics. We're going to start with this general introduction, which we've covered. We're going to look at what a spatial question is. We're going to turn around and answer spatial questions or see how we might get to answering spatial questions. We'll look at the importance of GIS literacy, and then we'll also do a quick 30,000-foot overview of spatial technologies and what exists out there. With that, then we'll take a quick glance into what we're going to cover for next time, what specifically is a GIS. So let's dive into it. What is a spatial question? How do you define or describe a spatial question? Essentially, what we're trying to ask here or define is, how am I addressing my question? What is it that I'm trying to ask? A spatial question is a type of inquiry that focuses on spatial relationships. It could be the arrangements or properties of objects, their locations, or phenomena both in the physical and or abstract space. The other thing to consider is that these types of spatial questions are actually temporal questions as well. How do changes occur through time? Spatial questions generally explore the ways in which things are positioned, organized, or distributed within a given context, hence that temporal aspect as well. Spatial questions often seek to understand the relationships between different spatial elements, such as distances, directions, shapes, sizes, or even patterns. These questions can pertain to various domains. This includes geography, of course, urban planning, makes sense, architecture, okay, mathematics, what? Yeah, there's a lot of math that can actually be involved with spatial questions. Computer science, coding, if you will, and more. What about the interface in which somebody is actually asking the question, and how are you receiving the answer? Environmental science, and one of my favorites, geology. You can even go as far as cognitive science. That all ties into what a spatial question may be and how we might go about answering a spatial question. Such questions may involve analyzing and interpreting spatial data, maps, graphs, all this just to gain insight to spatial phenomena. One way that we could actually really concisely summarize this concept of spatial questions is actually put forward by Williman and their publication, or their thesis that got published, The Semantic Structure of Spatial Questions in Human Geography. Within that publication and thesis, it's quoted, quote, "A spatial question is a question where the concept of location is necessary for formulating the answer," close quote. So if you think about it, spatial questions require location, knowing where one is in time and space. And so all those things pertain to us day to day. It could be as simple as where's the nearest Starbucks? It could be, how do I avoid the traffic jam if I leave the office late? Or how do I get my kids from place to place in a timely manner to make piano lessons, to make soccer practice, to make plays, all sorts of things. So we're dealing with spatial questions day in and day out. Really good example coming from New York City is looking at this map in the center of the screen. Bike share station support per square mile. So if you're biking, where are you going to find the most support within New York City? So we can see that this little heat map, more to come on that, especially when it comes to spatial statistics. This heat map is really showing where the greatest support may exist within the city. Great publication there for you to dive into and take a look at. Some other spatial questions that we could look at and ask. What's the shortest path between 2 points within a city? Heck, I grew up in Wyoming. What's the shortest path between 2 cities on a map? How are houses arranged within a neighborhood? What is the relationship between position of stars in a constellation? Ooh, that's pretty far out there, no pun intended, but that's definitely a good one. How does the distribution of rainfall vary across a region? Or how is it lacking across a region even? And even bringing it closer to home, how can we optimize the layout of a room for efficient space utilization? Well, there's one that I think we've all done in some way, shape, or form. Spatial questions are essential in understanding and navigating the physical world, as well as in problem solving and decision making. They're all processes that really involve spatial considerations. spatial questions associated with spatially addressed answers. Now, what about the importance of this? We'll kind of emphasize that a little bit, but let's take it a little further out there. How do other people, how do entities view this? To quote Congressman Bruce Westerman, quote, education and understanding geospatial data is an increasingly important skill in today's world because it is used every day, close quote. That's for sure. Also in that same GIS Day of 2018, it was quoted that GIS literacy and spatial thinking are universal skills. If you learn this technology, it doesn't pigeonhole you into one career. That's for sure. And then that last little point that I have here on the slide, Geospatial Data Act, which was formed in 2018, enacted in 2019. There's a little publication you can search for online, ARC News via Esri Winter 2019. It talks about the GDA, the Geospatial Data Act. This codifies the committees, processes, and tools used to develop, drive, and manage the National Spatial Data Infrastructure, NSDI. Whew, that's a mouthful, right? And this also recognizes the responsibilities beyond the federal government for the development of keen, clear, and open spatial data. Federal government, hey, they're involved, but you and I are just as much responsible for these data as well. This act establishes the statutes that the Federal Geographic Data Committee, or the FGDC, has to really establish. They look at that for the development, the implementation, and the review of policies, practices, and here we go, one of my key favorites, standards related to geospatial data. So there you have it, some key importance on literacies as far as GIS is concerned. And let's talk a little bit about GIS. When we say geospatial technologies or geographic information systems, or GIS, are part of those technologies that are used day to day. If you look at the image there on the right, you can see that you can have street data that are layers inside a map. You could put that with building data, combine that with vegetation data. Once those are all culminated into one location, you essentially have a GIS, something that provides you spatial context through time and provides you the data you need to answer key spatial questions. You can also do this with remote sensing technologies. You've got all sorts out there, all sorts of things. You've got satellites that are flying overhead, and now we've got wonderful drones that we can use too. We can look at geolocation technologies. Where am I? How long was I there? Where's your kid, right? That type of thing. We'll take a look at that in a later video, and in particular, we'll take a look at how things like Apple and other entities utilize geospatial technologies. Within those geospatial technologies, we'll see how they might use a global positioning satellite network, or how they may not. And speaking of which, the last bullet point, we have to realize that geospatial technologies are often linked and enhanced via the internet and a myriad of other various applications that build geospatial capabilities. Phones in particular are really good about using certain GPS chips, but they really hone in on where you're located based on the use of internet and that GPS. Powers combined to give us, if you will, a geographic information system, hence the 30,000-foot view of geospatial technologies. So what we'll do in the next video is we'll take a look about what a GIS really is, what it consists of, and how we might further utilize this in the various sciences, and specifically in the spatial questions that we might address. So we'll catch you in the next video.